Imagine waking up one morning, opening your phone and seeing headlines everywhere. Bitcoin supply crisis, retail investors locked out. You go to your exchange app and the buy button is still there. But the numbers don't make sense. The cheapest Bitcoin available is $500,000. And even at that price, there are barely any sellers left. It sounds crazy, right? But here's the shocking truth. This future is not only possible, but it's unfolding right now. Most people still think of Bitcoin like it's infinite, like they'll always have another chance to buy it cheap. But that illusion is collapsing and fast. Out of 21 million Bitcoin that will ever exist, nearly 4 million are already lost forever. Another 70% of the supply hasn't moved in over a year, and those holders have proven they don't sell. And what's left? It's being eaten alive by trillion-dollar institutions like BlackRock, Fidelity, and faster than miners even can produce new Bitcoin. This means Bitcoin is running out faster than you might think. And by the time the average person wakes up, the opportunity will be completely gone. So in today's video, I'll break down exactly why Bitcoin is vanishing from circulation, who is taking it, and what this means for you. Make sure to stick around until the end, because the last point I'll share will completely change how you see Bitcoin's future. Now, before I start, a quick disclaimer. This video is not financial advice. I'm not here to tell you what to buy or sell. I'm just sharing research history and my personal perspective on Bitcoin. Remember, investing is risky, so you can lose money. Never invest more than you can afford to lose, and always do your own research or talk to a professional before making financial decisions. Now, that out of the way, let's start with the basics. The scarcity reality. Bitcoin's total supply has been capped at 21 million coins. That's the number everyone knows. But here's the thing. In practice, the supply you actually buy is much lower. First, lost Bitcoin. Studies estimate that around 3.5 to 4 million Bitcoin are gone forever. Think about the early miners like James Howells, the guy who accidentally threw away a hard drive containing 8,000 Bitcoin back in 2013. That stash alone is worth billions today, and is buried under a landfill. Multiple stories of that, thousands. You can realize just how much Bitcoin has vanished into that void. Now, second, long-term holders. Over 15 million Bitcoin hasn't been moved over a year. That's not just whales or institutions. That's the regular people like you and me, who understand the game and are holding through every dip. These are not the weak hands. These are people who watched Bitcoin crash from $69,000 to $16,000 and still didn't sell. And then we get the exchange supply. Today, less than 2 million Bitcoin sits on exchanges worldwide. That's it. To put that in perspective, Apple has over $60 billion in cash. If they decided to move just a fraction of that into Bitcoin tomorrow, they could wipe out the liquidity supply instantly. So when people say there's 21 million Bitcoin, they're missing the real story. The coins you can actually buy, the liquid supply, is shrinking every single day. And this brings us to the biggest shift happening right now. Institutions are eating the supply. For years, people laughed at the idea of Wall Street getting into Bitcoin. They said institutions would never touch it. But today, those same institutions are buying more Bitcoin than miners can produce. Look at the ETFs. When the US finally approved Bitcoin's spot ETFs, the demand exploded overnight. BlackRock, Fidelity, ARK, Grayscale, they've turned Bitcoin into a product that pension funds, insurance companies, and billion-dollar asset managers can buy with a single click. And here is why it matters. Bitcoin miners currently produce around 450 Bitcoin per day. BlackRock's iShares ETF alone has had days they bought over 1800 Bitcoin in a single day, quadruple what miners create. When you add all the ETFs together, they've been buying several times more Bitcoin than the supply entering the market. This is like having a gold mine that produces 1 ton of gold a day, but the buyers are demanding 5 tons a day. Where does that extra come from? That existing supply. And that's exactly what's happening with Bitcoin. Exchange balances are collapsing to levels we haven't seen in 2017. Coins are flowing into cold storage where they basically sit for years, maybe decades. And now here is the point. Once these coins are in custody for institutional investors, they're effectively gone from circulation. Think about it. When a pension fund buys Bitcoin, they're not flipping it for a quick 20% gain. They're holding it as a long-term hedge against inflation and against currency collapse. That Bitcoin won't come back to the market. And this is just the beginning. ETFs are still relatively new. Adoption is still early. Imagine what happens when more sovereign wealth funds, endowments, or even central banks start allocating purely to Bitcoin. The question wouldn't be, will Bitcoin go up? The question is, how fast will it run out? Now, here is even where things get crazier. While institutions are swallowing up supply, retail investors, the average person, is still asleep. Surveys show that less than 5% of people worldwide own any meaningful amount of Bitcoin. Even in developed countries, most people think Bitcoin is too risky, too volatile, or just a passing fad. And this delay is fatal, because by the time the average person decides to buy, the supply will already be locked up by institutions. Think about the 2017 bull run. Retail poured in when Bitcoin hit 15k, 18k, 20k. They weren't early, they were late. They bought at the top because they waited for proof instead of acting on the fundamentals. Now, fast forward to now, and the same psychology is playing out. Most people are still waiting for the perfect entry point, still hoping for a massive crash back to 60k, 50k. But here's the brutal truth. The crash is unlikely to ever happen again. Not when ETFs are buying thousands of Bitcoin every single day, no matter the price. Retail thinks they have the time. They think there's always another dip coming. But time is the one thing they don't have. And this leads us to the hardest truth. You're not competing against other retail buyers anymore. You're competing against billion-dollar asset managers, hedge funds, and soon central banks. These players don't care if Bitcoin is $100,000 or even $1 million, $10 million. They have endless fiat at their disposal. For them, Bitcoin isn't a speculative trade. It's a strategic necessity. Now think about it. Countries with collapsing currencies like Argentina, Turkey, Lebanon are already seeing Bitcoin adoption on the ground. Imagine what happens when central banks themselves start adding Bitcoin to their reserves. Just like what they've been doing with gold. At that point, you're not just competing with Wall Street. You're competing with whole nations, powerful nations. And here's the ugly truth. Once those players lock away Bitcoin, it's gone for good. You'll never see it again. This is why I say Bitcoin isn't just scarce. It's disappearing right in front of us. Now, so what does this all mean for you, the individual? I think it means the window of opportunity is closing, and fast. This may be the last cycle where the average person can realistically buy a meaningful amount of Bitcoin. Think about the math. Again, I keep talking about this. Think about the math. If there are 21 million Bitcoin, and let's say 17 million are already locked away, That leaves maybe 4 million coins realistically available. Divide that by 8 billion people, and that average person's fair share is 0.0007 BTC, less than $100 today. That's the scarcity we're talking about. Now, layer on top of that the fact that ETFs, institutions, and eventually governments are buying thousands every single day. Do you really think the average person is going to be able to stack whole coins in the future? I think no chance. And here's the twist most people don't realize. You don't need a whole Bitcoin to benefit. Even a fraction, 0.1, 0.01, could be life-changing in a world where Bitcoin becomes the global monetary standard. But to get there, you have to act while there is still supply left. So here's the bottom line. Lost coins are gone forever. Long-term holders aren't selling. And institutions are draining supply faster than miners can replenish it. Also, retail investors are still asleep. So in my humble opinion, the real supply shock hasn't even hit yet. But when it does, the price will move so fast, it will leave people completely stunned. Bitcoin is running out faster than you think. And this might truly be the last cycle where you can still stack enough to change your life. The choice is yours. Will you be the one who waited until Bitcoin was completely unaffordable? Or the one who saw the supply crunch coming and acted before it was too late?